Welcome, everybody. Mike Hamilton here. For those that don't know me, perhaps this is your first webinar with MadCap Software. My official title, I'm the VP of Product Evangelism here at MadCap Software. But that's just a fancy way of saying don't ever let your business partner pick you a new title when you're away at a trade show in Europe. No, just kidding. I have been with MadCap since the very beginning, one of the founders here, so have some kind of insights to the subject matter today. Now, today's webinar is going to be all about the Flare 2021 R2 release that just was recently put up on our download servers for our customers to enjoy. And a big focus of that new release is a lot of learning and development type of functionality, some new updates, and a few other things we'll get into. Now, we've already done one webinar on this subject that was done by Jennifer Morse, and she did an amazing job. So if you saw her webinar, there's going to be a lot of redundancy here, but I am going to approach this from a slightly different context. For those who know me, this is, old news, but I spent the first part of my career while still in the, technical communications community. I was actually an instructional designer before I transitioned over into the technical writing side of technical communications. So I'm going to approach this again from probably a slightly different perspective. All right, but before we jump in, before we get started, in case this is your first webinar with us, a couple of quick announcements. One, before anybody asks, yes, the webinar will be recorded. Everybody who has signed up, even if they don't attend live, will receive an email with a link to that webinar recording as soon as we post it live. And it usually goes live within 24 hours of concluding the webinar. Then the other kind of pre-announcement, if you are attending, you may have noticed that while you can hear me, I can't hear you. Your microphones are on mute. And that's to protect your privacy, make sure nobody can hear what's happening in your office. However, I am able to take questions. If you explore that GoToWebinar dashboard software, there is a questions panel. And I'm running dual monitors here. So on one monitor is the desktop that I'm sharing with everybody, but on my second monitor, I can see that questions and answers panel. So if at any point throughout the webinar, if you do want to pose a question to me, please just go ahead and type it into that question and answer panel. And I'll try to get to as many of those questions as I can. All right, so now kind of the big question, what are we doing? Is MadCap suddenly making a pivot and going into the learning and development world? We've been in the technical writing world for 16 years. Well, it's not so much a pivot. We're not really changing course. Our core market is still our core market. We're just broadening the umbrella a little bit. We're finding more and more training and development specialists are using Flare because of the benefits they get from it. So why make them fight? Let's just go ahead and expand the functionality. So one of the first things we're doing is we're trying to break down those silos. There's no reason that the technical writing team and the learning and development team have to use separate tools. Let's just broaden the scope of Flare a little bit, add some new functionality, and just make it a better fit for everybody. So again, like I said, and as I said, the first part of my career was actually in training. And I've been in kind of both sides of the fence. I can remember one place where I worked where the technical writing team and the training team, two separate departments, it was almost like the Hatfield and the McCoys. I mean, they were at odds with each other. Both groups were convinced that the other group was stealing their resources. It was just a horrible relationship. But then I had a chance to work at another location. You probably never heard of it, but it was a company called Cymer. And that was a case where the technical writing team and the learning and development team, the training department, they actually had a great relationship. So it can work both ways. And again, one of our goals is to try and how do we bridge that gap? How do we make it so that it's easier for both teams to be able to reuse each other's content? So again, one of the core reasons of kind of broadening the scope to enable that kind of collaboration. All right, so that's kind of why we did what we're doing. Now, what are the benefits to the technical writers, the technical communicator side of the house? Well, again, and this is probably the part that excites me the most, and I hate to say that to my instructional designer brethren out there, but quite often, especially if I've been in Flare and I've written a very kind of technical procedure, I've always wished I could do some of those old instructional design techniques, like, embed self-check questions. So, here's 2 pages of very technical content, and then just drop in a couple of questions just to validate, hey, did you grab what I was trying to communicate here? Can you answer these questions? So there's a lot of kind of cross-pollination learning and development techniques that could be used by technical writers. And again, I already mentioned this, but a lot of the content overlaps between the technical writing and the training world. So why have separate silos? Why are we, copying and pasting each other's content, which then causes problems later, where one team makes an update, and if you forget to share that update with the other team, then things get out of sync and people get cranky, and it's just not a good thing. Now, benefits to instructional designers and courseware developers. Again, we're trying to broaden the umbrella a little bit and bring some new people into the fold. Well, the whole single sourcing concept is just foreign to most learning and development tools. A lot of the learning and development stuff is very old school. You write it once, you put it in a can, that's course A. Now you write it all again, put it in a new can, that's course B. There isn't that, content reuse, the use of variables, use of conditionals like we're used to. So being able to write once, publish to many, that's a whole new concept to a lot of instructional designers. And that's why we find a lot of them are already kind of finding Flare organically, even though it's not a perfect fit in some regards. So maximizing content reuse, the ability to do multi-channel publishing, reducing localization and translation costs, that's becoming huge for a lot of our learning and development customers. And the ability to very quickly combine content from various and multiple sources. When you get Word documents from marketing, Word documents from engineering, a PowerPoint deck from one of your peers, some FrameMaker files, from a vendor. One of the neat things about Flare is the ability to pull all of this content together quickly without a bunch of copy and paste. And again, that kind of content reuse is just typically foreign to most people in the learning and development world. And then something else, and how do I say this and be kind? A lot of the learning and development tools out there just haven't grasped onto the whole kind of XML-based complete separation of content from look and feel. I can remember back in the day, we used to have to do a rebranding of one of our training curricula for a partner company. And that was a nightmare because you would write the whole training curricula with our in-house branding, but because of the way the tools worked, it was all embedded. And so once it was finally finished, you would basically copy and paste the entire system. And then it was about a 4-day job just to go in, change the colors, change the fonts, match the partner. Again, that goes away with the benefits that Flare brings with that separation of content from look and feel. So lots of reasons it just made sense to add some learning and development functionality into Flare. All right, so what kind of stuff are we talking about? And I mentioned there's going to be some redundancy between what Jennifer did and what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I know she bounced back and forth between the slide deck and Flare and demonstrated things one at a time. I think I'm going to introduce kind of what's new in this version first. We're just going to go through the slide deck. But then what I plan to do is bring Flare up live and do more of a walkthrough. If you want to explore the new functionality rather than demonstrate it kind of in a sterile way, I'll walk you through how I would approach learning some of this new functionality. And so it's going to be a little bit of a different take. Question just came in. So can I just use my existing style sheets when developing courses in Flare? If by existing style sheets, if you mean the standards-based cascading style sheets, yes, Flare will pull those in directly. If you're talking about styles that are written in something like Microsoft Word or FrameMaker, then when Flare imports that content, we will do our best to convert their proprietary style languages into the standards-based CSS. Now, in full honesty, that is usually about 90% accurate. Things like fonts, font colors, font sizes, that information comes in beautifully, where there's usually about 10% of handwork. A lot of the older, especially kind of paper-based tools, some of their indents and their margins are based on the edge of the page, which is kind of foreign in CS. In CSS, things like indents and margins are based on the parent element. So as a result, if anything goes wonky, wonky being a technical term, it's usually after the import, your indents and your margins will look a little bit exaggerated. And again, they're no longer based on the edge of the page. Now they're based on, margin or their parent. So that's typically the 10% of rework that would have to be done. Just switching those to a more child-parent type relationship adjustment. All right, so didn't mean to go off on a tangent there. So some of the stuff that is going to be new in this new R2 release of Flare 2021. And the first one, you can actually add like quiz type questions directly in your topics now. And out of the gate with this first release of learning and development functionality will include two different question types. You can do a multiple choice question. Here are the 3 or the 4 radio buttons. Choose the correct answer. Or it will also support multiple response questions, where instead of radio buttons, they're check boxes, and you ask a question, okay, of these 5 answers, check all that apply. So maybe of those 5 check boxes, 2 of them or 3 of them need to be checked for that answer to be considered correct. that can now be added directly right into your topics. And again, we'll do some live here in a minute. Once you've added those questions, well, then you have another decision point. Are these questions that I've added, are they going to be knowledge check questions, meaning there is no tracking, there is no scoring, this is just immediate feedback for the reader? So I could have, again, a procedure, here are 14 steps, and to make sure that they had good comprehension, I could add a couple of knowledge check questions underneath. Hey, if you were going to perform this procedure, what tools would you assemble in advance, kind of a thing. Just checking, hey, did you really read the full procedure? And if they get it right, they get immediate feedback. If they get it wrong, they get immediate feedback. But it wasn't recorded or stored anywhere. On the flip side, you can tell Flare, okay, I've defined this collection of questions, but I want this to be a quiz or a test. I want this to actually be graded, and I want the results of that grading to be submitted to a learning management system. I want to have a permanent record: who took the test, who took the quiz, what score did they get, how many minutes did it take them to complete. I mean, all of that tracking data can be pulled as well. So it's kind of your choice. Is it a knowledge check, a self-check, or is it an actual quiz or test? Now, if it's going to be a test, again, there are certain parameters you have to define. One of those, what's the passing grade? Do they have to have an 80% accuracy? Do they have to have 70% accuracy? Okay, question just came in. What about just open-ended, fill in the blank essay type questions? This new learning and development functionality does not yet support just fill in the blank essay type answers. And that's only because there's really not an easy way to grade those in an automated fashion. At least this release, it was all geared around that immediate feedback for the learner, the reader, immediate results. So we don't have the ability to do essay type questions at this time. But as I said, you can assign what is a passing grade. That can be added as part of the metadata for the test. You can then customize pass and fail pages. Oh my gosh, this would have been so awesome for me way back in the day. I actually did some training curricula for electricians, and it would be so good to have a test where at the end of the test, if they passed, which you'll see in a minute, you get immediate feedback, it would say, oh, congratulations, you had a 92%, which is well above passing. You can move on to module 14. Or if they fail, then there can be a dedicated fail response page that like, oh, we're sorry. You scored a 76%, but 80% is required for passing. So here are 3 links you can click on to access some, remediation study. And tomorrow you can take this assessment again. So again, you can customize the pass and fail pages, what steps they must do based on whether they passed or they failed the quiz or the test. You can also, and again, this is something you may or may not want to use, but you can set up the test to where they can have multiple tries. Now, I will admit that seems a little strange to me, but then I have more of a a physics, a hard sciences type background. And apparently this is fairly common if you're testing or quizzing on like soft skills. Oh, didn't quite get that right. Let's give you one more chance. So you can actually set it up. So how many retries can they have on a particular question? That can be set to 0. You get one shot at it, or you can set it to 1 retry, 2 retries. That can be set up. And one of my favorite things, again, having managed a computer-based training lab, it was not uncommon in the days past that I would catch students kind of rubbernecking and trying to look at how the student in the cubicle next to them was answering questions. Well, you can have your Flare quiz or your Flare test set up to automatically randomize the answers. So on question 3, on one student's computer, the correct answer is the top radio button, but then it randomizes, and the student in the cubicle next to them, the correct answer might be the bottom radio button or the middle radio button. So they can't just, peek around the corner and based on position, try and copy. They're going to get the wrong answer then. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're not connected to a learning management system or a learning recording system, then it's just basically self-checks. But if you are connected to an LMS, then all the data can be tracked, it can be reported, and you can just, pull data history on any particular student if you need to go to that level. Now, we did have to put some limitations on this. So the particular compliance that the new Flare functionality standardizes to is XAPI, SCORM 2004, or SCORM 1.2. I had somebody ask earlier about AICC compliance, and I will admit that's the first time I've heard that in about 15 years. I didn't even know that still existed. That wasn't even on our radar at this time. We saw that as kind of legacy. So those are the big conformance items that we have. We conform to XAPI, SCORM 2004, or SCORM 1.2. So question just came in from Bob. Well, can that randomize feature be used on questions, not just answers? And as an example, he asks, could we have a pool of 50 questions, but then each learner would just randomly be tested on 10 of those 50 questions? Not at this time. Honestly, that is huge on our to-do list. It just didn't quite make it into this release, but definitely that is high on our list. All right, now another option, because of Flare's single sourcing capabilities, we can even publish PDF versions of these tests or quizzes. And even the PDF versions, you have 2 options. We could publish a PDF version that could literally be printed to paper, hand it to a student, and then using an ink pen, they could go through and they could just check, the radio buttons or the multi-select boxes and just submit that as a standardized paper test. Or when we publish the PDF, Flare can include check marks and check boxes and generate an answer key. So that way, whoever the instructor or the proctor is, well, they have one that's already pre-filled out with all of the correct answers. All right, question just came in. Does the LMS have to be linked to MadCap in some way? The answer is no. When we get to the live demonstration part, we need to get pretty quickly. I'm slipping away here. HTML5, a brand new folder, a learning and management folder that will have a zip file in it for the compliance to SCORM 1.2, SCORM 2004, or XAPI. You would then go to your LMS, your learning management system, and you would upload that zip file. I'll show you where it is, how to do that all. But then for the tracking, you would actually enroll students in your LMS, and they would take that exam or take that learning module through the LMS. So it is not connected to Flare or MadCap in any way. Flare generates the files, which are then ingested into the learning and management system. I hope that answers your question. We tried to do it in a way that was as standards compliant as possible, just to keep it simple and easy. All right, so that's all the new learning and management stuff. I think I'm going to pause the slide deck there because time is slipping away. I want to get the live part in. So let's transition over to Flare quickly. All right, so this is Flare 2021 R2. Question from to get the quiz. Actually, that would be your choice. That would be one way, or the entire HTML5 system can just be hosted in the LMS. So that way the student isn't bouncing back and forth. If it's not tracked, they could just go into your HTML5 like normal, wherever you host it. If it's going to be tracked and scored, well, they would just enter the entire thing right from their LMS system. Again, it'll make more sense when you see it live here in a moment. All right, so to make it easy, if you want to explore all this new functionality, our technical writing team, the wizards of documentation they've created some awesome new project templates. So to explore this new functionality, just launch Flare, go up to the File tab, choose New Project using the New Project wizard. Then when the New Project dialog opens, just give it a name. We'll call this Training Webinar number 16. Choose the storage location. I'll click Next. And now there are all of these templates, these projects that are included. One of them is a brand new eLearning template project. Now there's an online only version, and there's one that's already set up for both online and PDF. I'm going to do the online only version just to keep this simple, keep the webinar, within the hour. I'll choose the new eLearning option. I'll click Next and then Finish. This is going to open up a brand new Flare project, and it's broken into 3 major areas as far as the topics go. There's course content. So these are all of the training topics, just informational topics. Then we have course knowledge check topics. And again, this doesn't have to be set up this way. This is just one example, but these are Flare topics that include kind of self-check questions, but we have no intention of tracking or scoring these. And then there is course test topics. Now, these are the actual test questions, one per topic, that we do plan to score and test. Now, just for some samples, I love what our tech writing team did with this, but if I randomly open some of these course content topics, like here it says just text, well, that's pretty much what that topic is. It's just text. But the one that says 2 tiles If we double click and open this, well, this is using the responsive design functionality in Flare. So here we have one cell on the right with textual content. We have a cell, on the left. On the right, we have a cell with some graphical content, but it's automatically set up. So if it's a desktop or a tablet, it's side by side. But if they were on, say, a smartphone, it then stacks up vertically, automatically. So if you haven't done any responsive design work, then this project is also set up so you can explore that functionality as well. Hotspot pop-ups, that's kind of old school, but I'm jumping way ahead, but one of my favorites, I have to show this off. This is also brand new in Flare. Here I have a heading 1, I have some introductory text, but then under that, it just says iframe. What? Well, if I right click on that iframe and I go into its properties, edit iframe, well, there is a link to a Wikipedia article. What is going up with that? Well, look what happens when I preview this. It's almost like having a web browser embedded in your topic. So here you can see what was written, that big header, that's coming from a template page, what used to be known as a master page. Then we have our heading 1, we have our, but then everything inside this iframe is literally loading from Wikipedia, and it's live. A student, a reader could navigate, they could read this. So if you need to link to kind of augmenting content, well, now you can do that from within one of your topics. And of course, that can be done outside of eLearning as well. It's just in this demonstration, it was used as a eLearning topic page. All right, so that's pretty traditional. These are just topics being used for course content. All right, now we get into the new functionality. I'm going to open that first knowledge check topic. And it's really broken into 3 parts. Now, bear with me, it doesn't look like 3 parts here, but I'll show you the 3 parts. There is the question itself. Then, once you've added the question, you add the feedback mechanism. And then once you've added the feedback mechanism, well, then you can add the submit button. Now, the reason it's modular like that, some customers don't want feedback to be immediate, some do. Some want a submit button on a question by question basis. Others want one submit button at the bottom of the page after doing 3 questions. It's pretty flexible that way. But to back up and show, well, how would you add one of these? Well, let's go ahead and add a new one. I'm going to put my cursor at the end of the heading 1 and press enter. And then we're going to go to the new eLearning tab up on the toolbar. And let's just click multiple choice. I want to add a new multiple choice question into this topic. It says enter question up at the top. I'll just highlight that text and I'll type, what is Mike's favorite color? Now for answers, I'll come down here and you can have as many radio buttons as you want. You just keep pressing enter. But let's throw a fake answer in here first, yellow. I'll press enter. Now the real answer, blue. I like blue. And then enter. And let's just do, one more green. Now again, this could be 3 radio buttons, 4 radio buttons. You can have as many as you need. But because I chose multiple choice, I can only choose one answer. All right, so now that we have the test or the question, whether it be a test or a knowledge check, now up here, I can select add feedback. Once I click add feedback, well, now I get two options. So enter feedback for correct answers. All right, I'll highlight this text and I'll type correct, colon, or correct, exclamation point, I meant. Please move on to module 14. And then if they get it wrong, incorrect. Please see the proctor for next steps. And we'll pretend I can type when people are watching. All right, but we've identified the question. We've now added the correct, incorrect, immediate feedback. And if we want a submit button, I click add submit button. And now we have that submit button there. Now, one of the things that I do have to do, I have to manually check whichever is the correct answer. So I've added blue, I've checked it. So now if I do a save, well, this will work in the preview window. I see there are several questions popping in. I just want to get this one section done and I'll pop back over to the questions. All right, so I'll do a preview here. And now you can see the topic, first knowledge check. What is Mike's favorite color? Well, let's get it wrong on purpose. Let's check yellow and click submit. Well, in red text, incorrect. Please see the proctor for next steps. Yeah, I don't think so. I'm going to cheat and do it again because I didn't limit the number of retries. What if I click blue and I click submit? Ah, correct. Please move on to module 14 or, whatever message you want in there. Now that's the one we just added, the ones that were already here. What is the capital of Texas? It's Austin. I'll click submit. What kind of weather are you likely to have in Austin? This is a multiple select. So long hot summers and short mild winters. Click submit. And then it says correct. So that is an example of adding quiz or test questions, but using them just as a knowledge check. All right, so now that we have that, let me try and get my bearings here in the questions that are piling up. Would you have to create a new project? No, all of this could be added to an existing Flare project. Okay, there's a question about doing hotspots in Flare. There is a sample in this project using that. This is actually not a new technique. This goes back like 20 years. It's been around since the beginning of the web. I will be honest, not my favorite technique. There are some things you have to be careful of if you're going to use hotspots, especially if you're doing a responsive design. But if somebody's not familiar with it, there is a technique in Flare where you can go into an image. I haven't done this in forever. Is it image map, I believe? There we go. And you can actually add these clickable areas, and each of those clickable areas can be linked to an additional topic. So if we run this in the browser, well, now if I click on number 2, well, then I get information about Zilker Park. If I click on number 3, I get information about Lady Bird Lake. Now, in the preview, they act like links. But once we do the full build, they will actually open those other topics as little pop-up windows. Again, can you do that in Flare? Absolutely. Not my favorite technique. It's kind of old school. it can cause problems with responsive design. Question, can you use conditions to include or exclude content? Absolutely. In fact, throughout these topics, I could even salt in like instructor notes. And that way, when I do the final build, I could include or remove those instructor notes. Or I could even go to like my knowledge check topic, and an entire question could be conditionalized. If we publish for partner A, include this question. If we publish for partner B, remove this entire question. Can you add a hyperlink to the feedback answer? You sure can. Can you branch to the next module automatically based on correct responses? I will be honest, I would have to do some testing on my end. I haven't tried to do that yet. Are the tests and knowledge checks compatible with MadCap Central? Yes, that wouldn't get in the way of anything. How can you add that new project template and all its pre-built pieces to an existing project? Officially, there isn't a way. Unofficially, since the crazy mad scientist, what I would do in your case, create a new Flare project, just as you saw me do here. Then, once that project exists, open your production project, and then the same way you would import a Word doc or an HTML, you can actually import one Flare project into another. So go to your production project, go to the project tab, and choose import Flare project. You could then almost, I use too many sci-fi examples, but you could Borg that new training template project into your production project, and they would be one cohesive whole then. All right, I think I got to the, one more question on pop-ups. If you're doing that image map pop-up thing, can they only link to other topics, or can they just show a page or text box? It's easiest if they link to other topics, but the topic they link to could just be a simple string of text. It doesn't have to be a full-blown, super fancy topic with, headings and footers and all of that. Are there ways to link it to just a text string? Yeah, but that gets a bit more difficult. All right, but looking at the clock, we definitely need to move on. All right, so everything we've set up so far was just for a knowledge check. What if we want to kick things up a notch and we want to do a full-on test question? Well, let's go into the folder labeled course test. I'm going to open the topic question 1. Now, when I open this, you should be saying, well, wait a minute. That's exactly what we just did. You are correct, except because I want this to be tested and tracked with my cursor inside this test question and back on the eLearning tab now, I'm going to bring up test options. Here's where I can go in. Oop, and I totally goofed that up, didn't I? I wanted question properties. This is what I get for trying to get too fancy too fast. All right, question properties. That's what I really wanted. Again, for this to be tracked and to have this become part of an LMS, we need to have a dedicated tracking ID for every individual question. So that is what the question properties does. I can just, if there's a specific ID we need to add that our LMS generates, we can do it that way. We can just paste it in here. More typically, you just click the generate button And then Flare will generate a unique ID for each question that you want to have tracked. Once we establish that tracking data, and I would do that on every one of these test questions. And if you're wondering why they're all in separate topics, they don't have to be. The goal here was to make this flexible. Maybe I want to do one quiz that includes questions 1, 3, and 5, and another quiz that includes all 5 questions. By keeping them as separate topics, that's quite easy to do. But now for the final trick, how do we pull everything together? Well, we go into our TOCs, and you're going to notice something different about my TOC file. This did not exist until this R2 release, and that is I have a special node in my table of contents now. So again, from that eLearning toolbar, if you click Create Test, it is going to open your table of contents, and it's going to ask you to pick a node. Like if you have a blue book, you can say that blue book, that is my test, and it's going to change to this little question mark icon. So if we bring up test options, well, this is where I can go in and I can say, I want to randomize those answers. I want to help eliminate cheating. I want to limit the test retries. I want retries to be 0. Nope, they get one shot at it. If they get it wrong, they have to move on. What is the passing score? If they get 75% or better, well, then let's send them to the pass page. If they get less than 75%, then we can send them to the fail page. And I guess this gets back to a question that was asked earlier. If they pass, could they automatically be moved on? Well, yeah, they could, because they only get to see the pass page if they actually pass. If they fail, then we just obfuscate from them any links to the next module. We can actually send them to a fail page that says, okay, you didn't quite make it this time, but here are 3 links for some remediation information. We can study a bit more. So you have control of exactly what pages they will be directed to if they pass or fail. All right, so once this all comes together, let's go into targets. I'm going to right click and build. Now, I didn't take the time to show you the master page. If you've worked with Flare Master, template page, I'm falling back to old vocabulary here. I'm going to go ahead and open this in my browser now, and you guys will be able to see exactly what the students would see. And again, if I host this on my website, if I host this, in Central, then this would all act like a self-check. But if I load this up to an LMS, then this entire system we're looking at would be loaded into the LMS. So people don't have to bounce back and forth. So this is just a welcome page. If I click Start Course, well, here is that just text topic we looked at. But as part of my template page, I've added a new training proxy. It has these previous and next buttons, so I can work through the training topics. And it includes this page X of Y widget, so I know how far I have progressed through the training. So here I can click Next. Well, here's that 2 tiles topic. I'll click Next again. Ooh, that brings us to the first knowledge check. Now, one of the things I didn't point out is these knowledge checks, you can make them mandatory. So if I scroll down to the bottom right now, that next button is ghosted. I can click previous, I can go back and review, but I can't go forward. Not until I complete the knowledge check. So Mike's favorite color is blue, submit, got that one right. Capital of Texas is Austin, submit, I got that one right. And long hot summers, short mild winters, submit. Okay, that one's correct. But now that they've all been completed, only then will the next button come available. Now, you don't have to make them mandatory. You can make them optional. That's your choice as the author. I click next. We go back into learning topics, click next again. Here's just some drop downs, just some alternate ways of showing the content. Click next again, second knowledge check. That one's correct. And that one's correct. Let's click next. All right, here is a slideshow topic. Again, just a different way to present content. Click next. An embedded YouTube video in a topic. Click next. Here's that iframe example I showed earlier. Click next. Okay, finally, we get to the real test. So I now have a chance to back out. I can chicken out if I say no, because it tells me you are about to begin the gradable portion of the course. So now if I click next, okay, now I'm in the testing bit. Again, if this is in an LMS. If it's not, then it's just a self-test. So let's really goof this up. I'll pick all the wrong answers. I'm really going to goof this up. Maybe I should get one right. So that's not it. That's not it. Okay, so I only scored 20%. I failed. And again, whether you see this part or not, you can set that up in the properties, but it will actually tell me for each question what my answer was and what the correct answer was. And it will literally go through and show me, if you enable that, exactly where I did well and where I failed. Now, because I didn't include any links to pass pages or fail pages, it just stalled here. But if I'd included those links, then at the very bottom, there'd be a link that would take me to the fail page now with further instructions. All right, we have 8 minutes left. I know there's a couple new questions I need to get to, but I promised to talk about integration with an LMS. So because we just built that output, I'm going to right click on my project folder and open my output folder. This is just good old Windows Explorer. If I open the online combination course, that's the one we just created, well, this is brand new. I mean, we've always generated all these files for HTML5, but LMS package, that is brand new. If you go into that folder, there's just a single zip file. This is the zip file that you would upload to your LMS. Now, I have a sample here I can show. We do not endorse any one particular vendor, but this is when I had handy SCORM Cloud. I actually loaded that zip file. So now inside the LMS, you can actually send an invite to a student. Hey, click this link. I'll click the launch button. And that's going to launch the course in a browser. But again, it looks exactly the same as what we just launched from Flare directly. So back to that question that was earlier, if it needs to be tracked, it's really no different experience for the student other than they would probably have to log into the LMS first one time. But then when they go through the course, it's going to look, it's going to feel, I mean, all the learning topics are there. They don't have to go to a separate system to then do the quizzing and testing. It would just be a different URL for them to enter if you were actually recording those answers. And then once you go through and take all the quizzing and testing, well, then the LMS itself is then going to record, you know, was it completed? Did they pass? What was the score? How many minutes did it take? I mean, all that data will then be tracked on a per student basis. And again, not an endorsement of SCORM Cloud. It was just one that I had handy and it was easy to demonstrate with. All right, let's see if I can get to the questions. Gosh, 5 minutes left. Can you use the question ID to track data on which questions were the most challenging? That would depend on your LMS. There are some real budget LMSs that just keep like pass-fail data. There's some real fancy ones that do all kinds of data analytics. But at that point, at least for now, that would be outside of Flare and in the LMS itself. Question, if you try to click next when the knowledge check hasn't been completed, is there an alert? Honestly, I'm not sure, but you could always add a custom tooltip to it if we needed to. Again, I believe it's using a pseudo class to do that ghosting. So we would just have to add a special tooltip to that pseudo class. I'm 90% on that answer. Please validate the answer with your own testing. Again, this is brand new tech, so I haven't actually personally tried all these different scenarios yet. So hopefully this already got answered, but the question was, could I publish a standalone test and just load that to the LMS, or could the actual tracked test questions be intermixed with the content and still stored by the LMS? They can be intermixed. We just bundled the whole HTML5 system and upload that whole zip to the LMS, like that Austin example we just saw. Question about the CSS style sheet. Do I need to, whatever style sheet you have in your project, that is the default style sheet for the quizzing, the testing, any of these new topics. You could create a separate style sheet if you wanted, or what I would probably do is maybe just create some dedicated training classes, some H1 classes, some P classes, if I wanted my training pages to have a slightly different look and feel. Question, does our analytics engine register data about knowledge questions? As far as the tracking, no. That again would be done by the LMS itself. All right, we're down to 3 minutes. I think we hit that pretty well. Just very briefly, I'm going to go through some other new things above and beyond learning and development in this new version. One, I already showed you those iframes. That's super cool. If you need to kind of reference external content, it can actually be alive in a little mini browser in your topic. We've had a lot of people that use our automation, our mad build command. If you need to direct Flare to build a topic from an external script or like an external JSON file or something, that has always been available. However, you had to actually put your credentials into your target to access, an FTP server. That made some customers nervous. Well, now as an option, the credentials could be passed as part of that mad build command. And that way you keep the credentials out of your Flare project, if you prefer. And this is going to be something we needed to do just with kind of the evolution of language and society. We have used the word master in several places throughout the interface. That has evolved to have not a great connotation. So anywhere that term has been used in the Flare interface, it has been replaced with this release. I know that's going to cause some short-term confusion, but hopefully it's a long-term improvement. So the master browse sequence is now known as the primary browse sequence. The master favicon is now known as the main favicon. What used, probably this is the biggest one, what you used to call a master page, your custom headers, custom footers for your HTML5 outputs, that is now known as a template page. So if last week you added a new master page to your project, then you upgraded to R2 Flare 2021, and now next week you want to do it again, well, now you need to add a template page to your Flare project. Master page layout is now primary page layout. Master project is now parent project if you're doing global project linking. Your master style sheet is now known as the primary style sheet, and the master TOC is now the primary TOC. All right, and that's going to bring us to final announcements. I hope everybody has heard. We were really trying to do Mad World in October this year, but with the Delta variant ramping up in several states, some people were getting nervous again. So we have pushed Mad World back out into June of 2022. If you were planning in October, I hope that's not, too crushing of news. For those of you who are getting nervous about October, hopefully that's good news. That's some more time for the world to kind of get things in alignment here. But Mad World has been postponed out until next June. And just for attending this webinar, if you were going to be doing a purchase in the next month or so anyways, just mention to your salesperson that you attended this new learning and development functionality webinar, and that will get you a buy 3, get 1 free option on your new licenses. And I think that's going to wrap things up. Now we're already 2 minutes over. I tried to get to all of the questions as they were coming in. I think I hit them all. But as far as next steps, everybody watch your email. As I said, this has been recorded. Once we are done, the recording gets processed a bit. It will be posted within the next 24 hours or so. In addition, my slide deck will be posted, and then a synopsis of all of the questions that were asked and their answers will also be posted. But with that, thank you so much, everybody. I think it was another good webinar. If this was interesting to you, check out our schedule on our website. We do at least 2, if not 3 of these webinars every month. You can sign up for any of them. But with that, thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of today and an even better rest of your week. Bye-bye.